Welcome to another episode of Sounds Reasonable. I'm your host, Dr. Brad, and I'm joined in the production of our weekly show by Tim and Tate. Tim and I are members of the Free Thought community, and we are working on Tate, who is making great progress. Just kidding, Tate, just kidding. Our Sounds Reasonable website, of course, can be found on Facebook. Do you experience frequent irrational thoughts, a pervasive belief in a divine sky daddy, an insatiable urge to read horoscopes, perform spells, speak in tongues, or pray? Fortunately, you are now listening to the cure for these ailments. Sounds Reasonable. This show is dedicated to bringing you, the listener, the latest news in free thought, science, logic and reason, and politics and religion. And of course, we encourage you to share your thoughts with us after each episode by posting comments and asking questions on our Facebook page. What is free thought? What does it mean to be a free thinker? The dictionary definition is a person who forms opinions about religion based on reason, independent of tradition, authority, or established belief. Here's Christopher Hitchens' working definition. Our belief is not a belief. Our principles are not a faith. We do not rely solely upon science and reason because these are necessary rather than sufficient factors, but we distrust anything that contradicts science or outrages reason. We may differ on many things, but what we respect is free inquiry, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of ideas for their own sake. We will now move on to our science news segment, and remember that the scientific mind is one that allows its perceptions of reality to be constrained by good evidence and good argument. Now, how many of you liked building things with Legos? Tim, Tate, you ever do that?
Mine was Lincoln Logs. Legos came
I was
long
always
after
I was more of an outdoor guy. I went out and built things out of mud.
Good for you. Good job. But
not so much Legos. That's all we could afford. Legos. Bourgeois.
Of course, Legos have interchangeable parts. And the concept of interchangeable parts has been with us since Eli Whitney popularized it in the late 1700s. The idea, of course, is to be able to replace a defective part of a machine readily and quickly. But what if this same strategy were to be applied to antibiotics? This is the subject of this week's Science News segment. When bacteria are exposed to antibiotics, for the most part, this is a highly effective treatment against infection. However, if proper treatment is not undertaken and the infection fully eliminated, the potential for antibiotic resistance exists. Bacteria are amazingly efficient at finding ways to inactivate antibiotics and subsequently become resistant to future action of that antibiotic. Therefore, new antibiotics must constantly be designed or discovered to overcome the resistance. A common target for antibiotics is the process of protein synthesis. Because bacterial ribosomes, the site at which protein synthesis takes place in the cell, are structurally different from their eukaryotic counterparts, that is, mice cells, other animal cells for that matter. This can be taken advantage of for the use of antibiotics. Protein synthesis is dependent upon three types of RNA molecules known as ribosomal, transfer, and messenger. Of these three types, ribosomal RNA is the target for antibiotics because this exhibits the greatest difference between bacterial and eukaryotic cells. So Tim, if I could have that first figure, please.
There we go. And did you want to go with
Yeah, that one you had, Tim.
the one I had? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Okay, so what we're looking at is a bacterial ribosome. So that's kind of the big beige blob in the middle there. So the bacterial ribosome is in the process of synthesizing a growing polypeptide chain, or a growing protein. And so that's each of those little globes represents a single component of the protein chain known as amino acids. Now, the ribosome again acts as the site at which this takes place. And so you'll note that there are several antibiotics that are indicated here that can inhibit this process at various points. Okay, and so again, because there are numerous ways to attack this process in bacterial cells, it's an attractive target for the use of antibiotics. Okay, thanks, Tim. We'll go back to regular view. Thank you. So the paper I'm going to discuss today comes from Nature, September 24th of this year, and was authored by Daniel J. Blair and Martin D. Burke, and is titled "Molecular Synthesis Enables Molecular Jiu-Jitsu." So let's take a look at what the authors have to say here. So the development of resistance to antibiotics by microorganisms is a problem that has been billions of years in the making, but we don't have as long as that to solve it, for obvious reasons, right? So one way to speed up the search for solutions is to harness human creativity and modern science to rationally design drug-resistant evasive variants of naturally occurring antibiotic molecules. Unfortunately, such molecules often have to be synthesized from scratch. Okay, and herein is going to be the Lego strategy. So rather than having to start completely over, okay, we're going to have a new approach here. Typically, they have to be synthesized from scratch using long, highly customized sequences of reactions that are prohibitively slow and impractical at large scales. Writing in Nature, Lee et al. Report how a modular synthesis of the structurally complex antibacterial compound known as BM2 based on easily interchangeable molecular building blocks has provided access to BM2 derivatives that could not previously have been prepared, and has thereby enabled the rational development of a variant that evades an ancient resistant mechanism. Now, BM2 belongs to the streptogrammin family of antibiotics, which is subdivided into groups A and B. The two groups work synergistically to inhibit bacterial protein synthesis by binding two complementary sites in the catalytic center of the bacterial ribosome. And again, that's the molecular machinery that coordinates protein synthesis. Now, group A streptogrammins, such as BM2, bind to part of the ribosome called the peptidyltransferase center, or PTC, and promote the binding of group B streptogrammins to the adjacent tunnel region through which the nascent or newly synthesized proteins exit. Now, a key mechanism of bacterial resistance to this powerful antibiotic 1-2 punch probably evolved in parallel with the streptogrammins in the form of an enzyme known as acetyltransferase. Now, these enzymes deactivate group A streptogrammins by transferring what's described as an acetyl group to an alcohol group attached to a specific site in the antibiotics. The addition of an acetyl group produces a molecular bump, shall we say, that clashes with ribosome-bound RNA in the protein synthesis site, and thus blocks antibiotic activity. So, Tim, if I could have that second figure, please.
You bet.
Okay, so starting in the upper right, we have the ribosome being represented simply by that little beige molecule. Yeah, so right there is our ribosome. And then the antibiotic is represented by the oval shape that is fitting into the ribosome. And the site that it's fitting into, again, would be where the protein is actually synthesized. So as you can tell, it just physically blocks access of the amino acids and other molecules for that matter to the site needed to produce proteins. Now, the bacterium's strategy to prevent this is to modify the antibiotic by placing that acetyl group, which again creates that little bump. So that's happening in the middle. So there's the little bump that forms or is added by the bacterial enzyme. And as a result, now the antibiotic cannot fit into the ribosome. Okay, so it'd be kind of like if you had a key to a lock and you bent the key a little bit. Okay, now the key is not going to fit and obviously will not function. However, a different strategy now has been utilized to, yeah, go ahead and leave it there. So to outsmart the bacterial strategy, and that is to simply flip-flop the antibiotic. And they did this by the Lego strategy. So they changed what would have been the right-hand side, shall we say, of the antibiotic. So again, if you could point to that, Tim, on the left-hand part of the figure. Yeah, so right there. Okay, so they simply flipped that region to the other side. Okay, so now go ahead and go back to our other one there. Okay, so they flipped it to the other side and voila, it fits again. Okay, so note that simply by using a modular approach as opposed to having to make a brand new antibiotic, okay, the strategy now works once again. Okay, so a very, very clever approach to bypass antibiotic resistance. Okay, so let's go back to regular screen. Thank you. Now, there have been several attempts to prepare derivatives of group A streptogramins that could avoid this deactivation mechanism. But in each case, the derivatives were limited to those that could be prepared from the natural product itself through a process called semisynthesis, and were found not to be resistant to the bacterial enzyme deactivation. Researchers from the same group as Lee and colleagues previously developed a highly modular synthesis of BM2 to enable the unconstrained design of molecular variants. This Lego-like synthetic strategy allows molecular building blocks to be readily swapped, thus providing access to many targeted derivatives. Such modularity is a powerful enabler of creativity. Because many variants can be rapidly assembled and tested, researchers can make almost any target that they want. Moreover, unlike conventional small molecule synthesis, the price of failure is not high. It doesn't matter if any given compound lacks the desired biological activity because many others can be prepared, thereby increasing the likelihood of finding active small molecules. Modular construction strategies have previously been implemented on automated systems to make biopolymers such as peptides, oligonucleotides, and increasingly oligosaccharides. Achieving this modularity in the synthesis of structurally complex small molecules, such as those prepared by Lee and colleagues, is a promising step towards the more widespread adoption of modular small molecule synthesis. So what do you think? Have we finally solved the problem of antibiotic resistance with this strategy?
That's,
No.
yeah, well, here we go. We have a strategy because of the fact that drug companies are hesitant to pump money into research and development to try to find new ways to combat bacteria. And we are close to a point in time to where we'll be back to not having anything to treat bacterial infections and specific bacterial infections. And that's been a real concern in the healthcare industry or healthcare field for quite some time now, because of, we continue to drive that increase in resistance. So if you have something that's definitely a lot simpler than trying to develop a new antibiotic, where you can just modify existing antibiotics to make them active again, at least you'll have extended the life of that tool from what it is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The major challenge, of course, has been shall we say, not understanding in the early years, and perhaps avoiding avoiding the proper use in the later years of antibiotics. It was thought for a long time, well, shoot, all we got to do is load people up with antibiotics, and we'll close the book on infectious disease. I remember seeing the old black and white health films where where they said that was going to happen.
Yeah.
I have a question, Brad.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Once you've made the modification, what's to stop the bacterium from re-employing the same strategy and just overcoming it right away?
Well, some of those, of course, probably will. So it won't be the end strategy for every case. But the good news is that for a bacterium to do that, it's probably going to have to either itself develop a new gene, which it can do through multiple generations, or acquire one from the environment. But when you create something that is not out there naturally, it becomes a bigger challenge for the bacterium to overcome it. So this strategy, I think they're definitely onto something here. It would seem to me.
And if you think about it, the antibiotics coming from microbes because they were combating each other. Be it a fungi combating bacteria, bacteria combating other bacteria. So these antibiotics have been out, and the bacteria have been exposed to them. So yeah, if you can introduce something that's unique that they have never run across, and it's like having to start from scratch to try to battle that and avoid that. So yeah, I think it's really cool. It's just amazing if they can just, again, look at those. So let's go with MRSA, methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and if they can employ those strategies for that, because again, we're going to target those bacteria that are down to one or two. Now, in case of MRSA, I think they've had a couple of them come out in the last few years, because at one time they were down to one, vancomycin, only antibiotic to treat that. So, look at those that are really on the verge of not having anything to treat them, and using that strategy, that would be great.
Yeah. So this route, I think has a great deal of potential, and like you said, Tim, I guess it's pretty scary for the medical profession when they're down to one or two antibiotics that they can successfully treat a hospital infection with. That's certainly been a worry for them for a long time, and so hopefully this route will increase our ability to rapidly develop new antibiotics that can then subsequently be used to treat those infections.
Was there a game plan for if everything became resistant? Was there any ideas towards that effect? I mean, I love this. This extends the game for a while, but eventually, I mean, maybe a couple hundred years down the road, we're going to have more and more resistant bacteria that are resistant to everything. It's just
maybe, but I guess the good news is that the life processes that bacteria are dependent upon, we understand those very well. And so, antibiotics, while quite effective, aren't the only routes that we can go to inhibit those processes. But yeah, it's an arms race. That is how I've characterized it many times. So we develop something new that attacks them, and then they evolve a pathway that circumvents it, and now we're back to where we were before, having to devise another route to attack them.
And the key might be, again, the development of vaccines, development of those other treatments that can prepare the immune system for those organisms and lessen the reliance on antibiotics.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, that's kind of the state of the art of where we are right now, and it's very encouraging. So let's hope this strategy works for us for quite some time. All right, I think we'll go ahead and take our first break. So we'll be right back with more Sounds Reasonable.
Everything that brought me alive. Oh, we're all like monsters, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a rebel's fight without an alibi. It took my innocence without an alibi.
And we're back with more Sounds Reasonable on Sunday, September 27th, 2020. As we are all aware of by now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died recently, leaving a vacancy on the Supreme Court bench. As opposed to what Moscow Mitch McConnell declared when this happened during the Obama administration, when Judge Scalia died, that there would be no appointment made during an election year, Moscow Mitch has suddenly decided that it is now okay to fill this position before the election this fall. Well, the hypocrisy is noticeably clear. Is there really anything that is legally wrong here? Tate has the story. So Tate, is there a problem we should be concerned about?
Maybe, maybe not. First, we have to understand what goes into the process. We have to understand where they're coming from with their arguments, and where we have to understand who the person that's trying to put into the Supreme Court seat is. So let me give a little bit of background on everything here. And I'll be honest, he made the announcement of who he wanted to pick yesterday. And after researching her, Amy, a little bit, I'm a little less afraid of the portrait that they painted of her. But we'll get into that here in a minute. Let me paint a scenario. There's a first-term Republican president who's already put 2 Supreme Court justices in place. Weeks before the election for his second term, a vacancy comes up in the court. Sounds familiar, right? Well, that happened back in 1956 when Eisenhower was running for his second term, and more on that here in a few minutes. Nowadays, we got Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, the GOP clamoring to rush through a new nomination before the presidential election. Mitch McConnell is leading the charge, as you had said there, and he's insisting that it needs to get done now. Again, as you pointed out, in 2016, he was like, oh, we got to wait for the will of the people and the president get picked, blah, 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 blah. Democrats are arguing that it needs to be done after the election this time, calling Republicans hypocrites. Republicans, in turn, are claiming hypocrisy on the part of the Democrats. They're shining the spotlight on the fact that the DNC made the argument back when Obama was president that they had to appoint a justice right then. And they're right. That was the Democrat argument. So which argument now, later, which one has history behind it? There have been 29 examples of an open Supreme Court vacancy in a presidential election year or a lame duck session before the presidential inauguration. The president made a nomination all 29 times. That includes Obama back in 2016. The vote on his nomination was held off by Mitch McConnell. McConnell, whose main argument now seems to be that the will of the people lies in the fact that the Republicans not only hold the presidency, but the Senate as well. And he's trying to retrofit that argument to fit his argument back then in 2016. Between 1796 and 1968, presidents have pushed to fill a court vacancy 19 times while their party held the Senate. So there's a precedent there as well. Which brings me back to Dwight Eisenhower's situation. Although seemingly similar to what's going on now, Dwight actually played it pretty cool. He nominated a Democrat, even though he's a Republican. Of course, he also admitted that he needed to shore up some support, which I don't believe that Trump thinks he needs to do. Now, let's note that a nomination isn't a confirmation, which the Senate and Trump are trying to fast track the confirmation now. As I noted, there have been 29 cases of nominations. Zero have been confirmed in the fall of an election year. Not a single one. However, as it is, I got off place here. Let me move on to the next point. What is constitutional? What is legal? You asked at the beginning of at the intro of the segment. Well, here is what the Constitution has to say about it. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 states that the president, quote, shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur, and he shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments blah, 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 blah. That's all it says about it. That's it. It doesn't really get into anything more than that. It says that he can pick and choose. Boiled down, what it means is that he gets to make the nomination, run it by Congress, and then the Senate votes. There aren't any timelines or specific requirements mentioned in the Constitution of the United States. Trump could nominate his daughter tonight if he wanted to. The Senate could then vote on it right away and grant her a seat on the Supreme Court. Or it could be, hell, I don't know, Jason Momoa or Putin. He could nominate Putin, and if they went with it, it would be legal. That's the problem I think liberals are running into now, and that we're kind of seeing as kind of a grind on the Constitution. Now, let me backtrack saying that is what the Constitution says, but there is a traditional process that has been followed. It goes like this. 1, the president consults with senators before announcing his nomination. Then he nominates a candidate. The nomination is sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee for consideration. After that, the committee holds a hearing on the nominee. That usually takes a month or so to collect all the information that they need from the FBI and everything else. Again, we know he's trying to push this through in the next 6 weeks. So it's unusual, but again, the Constitution says you can do whatever you want to do. After that, they have the hearings, and during the hearings, witnesses both supporting and opposing the nomination come forth. Senators get to question the nominee. Then the Judiciary Committee votes on the nomination and sends its recommendation to the full Senate. The full Senate debates the nomination, and then when the debate's over, they vote on it. And if there's a tie, the vice president gets to break the vote. So with that in mind, does it look like they're trying to adhere to the customary way of doing things this time? Not by a long shot. Trump and the GOP are trying to get a new justice in before the elections again within 6 weeks. That's hardly enough time to simply vet a candidate, much less run the person through committees or have fair hearings. But again, the Constitution leaves the guidelines very broad and open. It says Congress may vest candidates. They may. It doesn't say they have to. It doesn't say if they do, they have to do it thoroughly. By the standards of the Constitution, Trump has every single right to run it the way he's doing right now. Is it ethical or fair? Did Mitch McConnell and the GOP make a completely different argument 4 years ago in a fairly similar situation? Yeah. But again, Constitution. So let's compare apples to apples and put it out there that both sides are being hypocrites at the moment in their arguments. Clearly, transparently so, the shining difference is that Mitch and the GOP got their way in 2016. Their argument was put into action. They set the precedent. You don't have to get your way. Actually, I'm sorry. You don't get to have your way, change your mind the next election, and then be taken seriously. But it's their constitutional right. Now, let's get to the candidate in this situation. Amy Coney Barrett. She's highly intelligent. She taught at Notre Dame Law School. She was a clerk for the Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. The last 3 years, she served on the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. Notre Dame law professor Mark McKenna has gone on record to say he doesn't agree with most of the things she's about, but she's brilliant and she's decent, is what he had to say. She's also extremely religious, whose anti-abortion view has stood out in her judicial record, stating once, quote, "Abortion is always immoral." However, during the hearings for her nomination to the Court of Appeals in 2017, she was pressed about this, about mixing her personal beliefs with being a judge. And she responded, "It's never appropriate for a judge to impose the judge's personal convictions, whether they arise from faith or anywhere else, on the law." She is a member of the religious group People of Praise, which has been brought to the forefront in news of late. They've been accused of believing that women have to be subservient to men. They referred to women in their congregation as handmaidens until just 2 years ago. However, doing some research, I found that they apparently believe that's a reference to when Mary found out she was going to carry God's child, and she says, "Now I'm a handmaiden of God." It wasn't anything subservient-wise in the Handmaid's Tale type sense. I couldn't find any real examples of that belief being carried out in the real working world by this group. It does seem that part of their religious experience is talking in tongues, but I have serious doubts that's going to show up anywhere in a court hearing. People of Praise also only have about 1,700 members, and they do cater to a lot of Catholic beliefs, which there's already a lot of people in Washington who are Catholic, so not a lot of big problems with this. Now, here's how the process is going to look. Barrett is expected to begin meeting with senators this week, and the Senate Judiciary Committee is slated to begin hearings on October 12th, just a couple weeks away. The panel is expected to hold 4 days of hearings with time for the traditional day of opening statements, questioning of Barrett, and testimony from outside witnesses. Then I expect them to confirm her right after that. There have been Republicans who have said that they're opposed to it, but I've already seen some side switching so far. Now, is this good or bad, or even what the people want? Washington Post poll released on Friday shows that 57% of those polled said the nomination of a justice to the High Court should wait until after the election. So what do we do? What do we do in the future to avoid this situation? I don't think anyone in Washington wants to find a clear solution. The way it is now, it allows for posturing and drama from everybody on all sides. It allows for anyone to make a change in their argument that benefits them the most at any time. The issue of filling a seat in an election year has been around for over 100 years, and no one has sought to clarify or streamline that process at all the entire time. So is this going to be a problem? Yes, for those who oppose the nomination. No, for those who don't. And clearly not a problem for Washington because they've been dickering around with this since the beginning of the Republic. So that's what I got for an answer to your question.
Well, thanks for a very, very thorough report, Tate. I mean, that was awesome. What always bothers me with anyone that gets involved with Trump, because we have seen this right from the beginning. Once you get involved with Trump, suddenly you fall in line with Trump.
Exactly. Well, at the beginning, I said I'm not as afraid of Amy Barrett there. After doing some research, what I am afraid of are her handlers, Trump, McConnell, the rest of them. We've seen time and time again, like you were just saying, people go into Washington with the best intentions of working for Trump, and they come out bitter, or they fall under the spell, as it were.
Yeah, and that this position, because it's a lifetime appointment, is so critical. I mean, you cannot have somebody in there that is going to be a Trump legacy, shall we say.
Let me ask you guys this. There was talk of the Democrat side passing legislation that would only allow court justices to be in on the court for 18 years. Do you think that would be helpful or harmful? Because once you have a lifetime appointee, they can't really be influenced by any. They've got their job. You're not going to fire them. But if you got somebody in there temporarily, at least in my view, they can be molded one way or another to go in there and, you know, bias the court one way for whatever term. And then
Well, I mean, let's suppose that you get nominated at age 50. That puts you at 68 when you're off. You know, I just personally don't see a problem with limiting that term to 18 years. That, if you think about it, I think the 18 probably came from the fact that would be 3 turnovers of senator elections. You know what I mean? Because senators are elected for 6-year terms. So that'd be three senator terms. So you'd have turnover every so often, and you know that's, to me, that's what needs to happen. It really does, and not because I'm, you know, against this particular nominee, which I freely admit I am, but because the zeitgeist, if you will, of society is going to move much faster than the court will. So here you're going to have a highly conservative court trying to govern what has become an ever increasingly liberal populace. And you know, to me, that just is not what we refer to as fair representation.
And the other thing too is, and we've seen this where the justices do look at the law and not necessarily let personal thoughts or bias influence them. But again, you start worrying about, is it going to be at a point where that switches, where, you know, they're not making rulings based on precedent or based on law, based on their interpretation of the law. They start to allow those personal biases to influence. Now, you can say the same thing for the liberal side as well, but you know, so that's, I guess it's, I'm going
to say, I don't like this. I don't like this pushing it through. I don't like this 6 weeks. I don't think it allows for enough time for vetting the prospective justice, who, as you said, is going to be in there for their entire life. She may turn out to be wonderful. Roberts, you know, they thought was going to be a strict conservative, but he has gone across that to the other. He's made more liberal decisions. Of course, he's had some conservative ones, but he seems to have gone down and looked at the facts and was, for lack of a better term, he was reasonable. You know, like this show.
Exactly. We should have him on.
I honestly, this will of the people thing, it's a stage prop. It's an argument. It is nothing more than them looking for a way of not saying what's really there. We want the power. You know, they're making it's an excuse argument. We need to have time to vet these candidates, whether it's leads up to before the president can be put in office or not. I honestly don't care. If we can find a decent judge who can be more down the middle and make appropriate decisions, I'm fine with that. Otherwise, you know, otherwise, like, I'm sorry.
I thought Tim had another comment there.
No.
Oh, okay.
Say, otherwise, Tim was right. You got the same thing on the liberal side too. Many people can argue that Ginsburg leaned way too liberal, you know, in their view, and that she stacked it in that favor. Anyway. Yeah.
So, you know, obviously, we just have to wait and see what's going to happen. But again, thanks so very much for that report, Tate, and we'll be right back with more Sounds Reasonable after this break.
Come and go, and they come so easily. Tell
we're back, continuing our discussion of the Supreme Court. The Democrats and the popular media would have you believe that ultimately there is nothing anyone can do to stop the Republicans from filling the vacant seat on the Supreme Court. But are they right? Tim has the story. So, Tim, can we stop this latest example of Republican hypocrisy?
Well, thanks, Dr. Brad. Well, I'm going to give you some possible suggestions here on what can be done. And now, if you think about it, at this present time with the court and the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg off the Supreme Court, and again, looking at the makeup of the Supreme Court at this time, our nation has come to a point where, you can think of life, liberty, and justice for all, in jeopardy, based on the makeup of the court. And I think it's imperative that Democrats, free thinkers, progressives, and anyone who doesn't want to see the founding fathers, what the founding fathers envisioned for this great nation, to be eroded away because of the imbalance of the court. Now, today I'm discussing a September 21st podcast from the Young Turks titled 5 Ways Democrats Can Stop GOP from Filling Ruth Bader Ginsburg's Seat. So how can Democrats delay filling this open seat? Remember that Republicans delayed Obama, as Tate, we mentioned, that Tate talked about, and then they delayed it for over a year, blocking even just bringing Merrick Garland in for a vote. The Democrats just need to delay for just a couple months, not a year, just a couple months. So one way they talked about, the Chink talked about, was Democrats coming hardball and just trying to block every vote in the Senate. Republicans have always been good at blocking things all the time. They're doing it all the time. Delaying proceedings that the Democrats need is also a use that they could employ. Democrats need to ask for unanimous consent, which means they have got to have a quorum, which would be a minimum number present for the proceedings to be valid, which would then be 50 senators. So 50 senators must be present to proceed, and that will greatly slow things down. There's no reason not to do that. It is a delaying procedure. Number 2 and 3 here, I guess we could say, block lifting the debt ceiling and block continuing resolution to fund the budget. So Republicans have done this before as well. Democrats need to say the Republicans have no right to fill that seat. We're about to have an election, so whoever wins the election should be the one to fill that seat. Kind of flashback, right, from 2016. Republicans did the same thing for a year with Obama. It's the American people who will be the ones to decide the Supreme Court seat with the upcoming election. I know Tate talked about that as maybe it's just a ploy or a PR thing or a tactic, but it is a tactic that could be used. Justify it by saying that the people are going to decide whether it's true or not. I don't know. You may be asking, how can Democrats block lifting the debt ceiling or block the continuation of the budget? Well, they need the House to do that. And guess who holds the House? That's right, the Democrats, and they hold the House by a comfortable margin. So they have the ability to use that strategy there. All the Democrats need to say is that if the Republicans are going to vote on the Supreme Court justice, then they will not vote to raise the debt ceiling. They will not vote on a continuation of the budget. And using this tactic, if the Democrats want to block the Republicans, they can. Now, of course, that's going to cause an uproar. It cause an uproar with employees that are dependent on the federal government. And businesses, but if that's the trick, is that you have enough people that would be hurt by doing some of those things that maybe that would prevent the Republicans from going forward with with trying to fill that seat. Number 4, impeachment hearings. There's no limit to how many times you can bring the president up for impeachment. They can use all of his campaign violations and bring him up for impeachment one at a time. There are many things that the president could easily be brought up for impeachment on. I ran across a site that listed quite a few, and just here's some of the things they mentioned. Mentioned Trump used military aid to pressure Ukraine to interfere with the 2020 elections. President Trump has repeatedly pressured the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate and prosecute political adversaries. President Trump has repeatedly attacked the concept of the independent press. The Trump administration separated as many as 3,000 immigrant children from their parents at the southern border. The children and their families have been held in internment camps and cages with what the lawyers call inhumane conditions. Trump is unindicted. He's an unindicted co-conspirator because he directed Cohen to cause an unlawful corporate contribution and expense campaign contribution by paying 2 women hush money with the intent of influencing the 2016 election. That could influence that election. Now, there's that possibility that he's going to be brought up or could be brought up on tax evasion. You're looking into that, tax evasion. So there's a plethora of things I think that they could use if they wanted to, one by one, for impeachment. And that would, of course, disrupt the Senate because they would have to, by law, they have to hear those charges.
Right. The impeachment proceedings take precedent over everything, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That's why it would hold it up. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I understand. And the question is, will the Democrats have the courage to do it? That's the question. Okay. Number 5 on their list was Hillary Clinton. Okay. Now you may be thinking, what?
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton?
Actually, this is gaining momentum. Yeah. I heard about it like Wednesday, and by Saturday, I'd heard about it by 15 sources.
Okay. So what is, okay, we have nine Supreme Court justices, and that number is not in the U.S. Constitution. That number can be changed by law. So Democrats can threaten that if Republicans are going to fill that vacant seat, then Democrats will add more Supreme Court justices based on, and they can use based on the polling numbers. Now I know polling numbers don't determine what's going to happen in elections, but based on polling numbers, it's possible that not only will we have the Democrats have the House, have the Senate, and have the presidency. And so if that's the case, then Democrats could have could easily be able to increase the number of justices on the court. Now, you're still wondering, well, what does Hillary Clinton have to do with this? Well, here it is. It's a great strategy. The first justice to be added to the court would be Hillary Clinton. And this would, to quote Chink, it will make the Republicans' head explode. So go ahead, Republican, try to fill that seat. Try to fill that seat. Now, I would add a 6th one, and again, Tate, you mentioned this about term limits. So there's, like I say, there is a legislation. I'm trying to see who. The House Democrats introduced a bill that would put term limits on Chief Justices of the Supreme Court, as reported Friday in the Hill. Representative Ro Kahana, Democrat, California, if I'm pronouncing that right. The first vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus is spearheading efforts on a bill to impose term limits on the Supreme Court justices. According to the draft copy of the legislation, justices would be capped to 18-year tenure versus the lifetime appointment currently outlined in the Constitution. Current justices would be grandfathered in and would not have to step down from their roles, which I would like to change that, but the bill would have the president select nominees during first and third year of their term, and the nominees would then be approved by the Senate. So, So the Democrats need to have the courage to fight to prevent the vacant seat on the court from being filled. And don't let the Republicans or Democrats fool you. There are many options for the Democrats to use to block the Republicans from filling RGB's vacant seat on that court. So Dr. Brad and Tate, what are your thoughts on these possible methods for stopping the Republicans?
Courage or not, I think the optics of another impeachment are hard to chew on right now for Democrats, because it actually kind of worked against them, the last impeachment. And they don't want to, especially right now, right before an election, right before the voting, they don't want any kind of detrimental PR for their side.
Sure.
Because I say that because I'm not going to vote for Trump. I don't say it because I align myself with any particular group, but anybody who wants Trump out of office knows that we have to get people riled up and we have to get them out there. So again, impeachment, almost anything is bad optically and from a marketing view that they could. I love what you said about them. I love any of those options, but they're all going to make them look like villains, I think.
I wonder too, though, is there going to be the opposite effect if they don't do something? They're going to look like spineless, and people are going to,
you got to choose the lesser of the two.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, God, I just think you got to try to do something. And I think, in my opinion, those that are going to vote to being Democrat or not, but are going to vote to try to get Trump out of office, I think they're still going to do that. I don't think if Democrats go after this nomination that was necessarily going to affect maybe those that go after Trump, just because of all the it's insane. You just got to get him out of there. That's.
You say that, I say that, Brad says that. But it's amazing how many people believe the complete opposite, that they believe he's completely sane. And no matter what he says or he doesn't lie. He's just, he's just saying it as it is. And you look at him and you go, I'm walking away. Just walking away.
But that's that small, his base, that's his base.
Let me tell you something about, because I work in radio,
Yeah.
and again, I work in marketing. I got fired from a morning show job one time on one complaint. Because that one person, I'll tell you what, I went into this market, it was up in Minnesota, and in 3 months, I took it from 7th to 3rd place. I beat out Bob and Tom and everything with my morning show. And we just come off the ratings, and I had one complaint. And because they were loud about it, I got let go the next day. It doesn't matter that I had 40,000 other people who are completely happy. Those few people, that 33% is going to get loud. And what they did last time is part of it was this. They subdued other people into not going because they were so loud about it. And people thought they were crazy. So that other reason is why they didn't vote. And we just can't have that this time.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and again, sorry, Dr. Bragg.
that's all right. I was just going to jump in on a couple things. I would agree, Tate, that the country won't tolerate a second impeachment. So that one's out. But the more subtle approaches that looks like we're dealing with the budget, that is definitely something to do, because it's easy to simply say, what do you mean? We're simply working on the budget. So there, to me, that's one that's definitely viable. But I've almost come to the point where I'm tempted to just let this go, and then utilize kind of rephrase a saying that I used to use for a while. I used to say that dilution is not the solution to pollution. However, in this case, I think dilution can be the solution to pollution, because we'll simply expand the court to 13, and now we'll have 7 to 6 votes whenever we need them. So if we just wait till we have the power to do it, we expand the court to 13, put on 4 liberal judges, and now suddenly we've got 7-6. And and granted, this could be an ever escalating war. Maybe we'll end up with 99 judges sometime on the court
Take one down.
by the time it's all done.
One for each.
But to me, if we expanded the court and introduced the term limits,
That gives me an idea, Brad. That gives me an idea. Not necessarily 99 judges, but what if, for equal representation, we allowed a judge from every state?
Right. That's what I was thinking too.
Oh, crimey! No, I don't like that either.
First of all,
here's what I would do if I were in charge, which I should be, by the way. But if I were in charge, I would make judges an electable position. Why shouldn't a judge that has this type of power be an elected official? Why allow it to be an appointed one?
I don't know if you want them to become a politician, that might be. Wasn't the idea is that they are that?
But they wouldn't be a politician per se. I have never heard a judge in my 64 years of being alive run a campaign. Now there probably have been.
No, but
I've
right.
never seen one do it.
People around them will, though. You'll have PACs, and you'll have groups forming to support their judgeship and for them to get elected and to sway voters. I agree with Tim on this one. I think that makes it more, makes it less impartial if you made it political like that.
Yeah, you may very well be right. It may.
Well, maybe.
I don't know.
I
guess
years.
I'll stick with my original solution: expand the court and introduce the term limits.
And I was going to say, well, maybe it's maybe have a committee that is involved in selecting who's going to be.
Oh, we kind of already do. It's called the Senate.
Well, yeah. Well, the Senate though is I mean, if you have this, and again, maybe it wouldn't work if you had a balanced, supposedly quote impartial committee.
You know who might be the best? Have the people that actually have the law professors actually do it. They should know that they're actually going to know these people. And they should be in the best position to actually say, yeah, this person is the best possible person to put in there.
Right.
I don't know.
How about a lottery? You get a bunch of possible candidates, put their names in a hat, and draw one.
Can't be any worse.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that, I think we'll take our last break, and we'll be right back with our crazy story of the week.
Oops. I about pushed the wrong thing there.
I'm feeling so hollow. Don't you know? And don't you know? I'm living in shadow. Don't you know? And don't you know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? And you were fool's gold. Yes, I did.
And we're back with our crazy story of the week. Well, did you ever wonder where the Vatican got its choir boys? Turns out they are often orphans. Now, I don't know about you two guys, but being an orphan in an organization whose motto should be "No Child's Behind Left" would be a bit scary. So perhaps it is no surprise that the following defection happened. Today's crazy story comes from the Pathos blog Laughing in Disbelief and was authored by Andrew Hall on February 3rd of this year. And the title of the blog is Vatican Boys Choir Defects to Japan. The Vatican Boys Choir officially defected while performing in Japan's capital city today. Japan accepted their plea and the boys are enjoying special refugee status. The Vatican is demanding their kids back, however. And many in Japan are thinking that the Pope, cardinals, and bishops shouldn't be getting their hopes up. One anonymous Japanese official stated, "Hell no, they won't go." The next subtitle is Drama in G Major. The incident occurred while the choir performed in front of the emperor and other prominent members of society. All 30 boys aged 9 to 14 in the ensemble stopped singing in the middle of the Bach cantata. And I'm sorry, I'm not up on my German, so I'll just say the cantata in English is entitled "I Have Enough." 12-year-old Billy McAllister stepped forward and read a prepared statement. "We of the Vatican Boys Choir officially request sanctuary in Japan. Under international law, Japan is required to give refuge to children under duress. All of us boys renounce our citizenship to Vatican City and place ourselves in your merciful hands." The auditorium went silent for a few seconds. Billy continued, "We haven't been raped or anything like that. We boys just feel like we're being used to make the church look like it cares about kids. We don't want to be complicit in the church's practice of protecting priests who abuse kids." The reaction? Many in Japan believe the Vatican Boys Choir was wise to ask for assistance. After all, Japan is not a Christian country. Many citizens are not religious at all, and those that are follow a mixture of Shinto and Buddhism. Professor Andrew Kennard teaches at American University in Tokyo. He thinks the boys will enjoy the rest of their youth in a country that is renowned for its high quality of life and a very low percentage of pedophile Catholic priests. You have to hand it to the lads. They knew not to ask for help in the highly Catholic country like the Philippines. Priests would be standing in line as if it were beef brisket day at the local deli. The Vatican is demanding their kids back. They are warning that they will pray really, really hard for God to punish Japan for its principled state. Japanese officials state their country has a formidable defense force while Vatican City has Swiss guards. Professor Kennard noted, "Japan just told the Catholic Church, 'Come at me, bro.'" The future Japanese social service state members of the choir are going to find homes in stable families. Seeing that the church picked orphans for the choir, there will be no legal entanglements from blood relatives. Choir boy and ringleader Billy McAllister noted, "None of us ever felt safe in Vatican City. They always looked at us like we were not so forbidden sin."
Oh man.
So So there's obviously some satire in there, but the gist of the story is true. The Vatican Boys Choir did indeed defect to Japan and ask for sanctuary. So your comments on the crazy story?
That's
How big of a choir is it?
They said that in here. I think it was 30. Yeah, all 30 boys. Yep, all 30 boys.
Oh, man.
that's a pretty well thought out and prepared statement. So I wonder, makes you wonder if they had help preparing that, or if that was.
There may have been. You know,
Yeah. But anyway, it's just well, obviously they did some research. Somebody did some research because they knew the law. They knew this is. They would have to grant them asylum to investigate. So,
Well done, I guess. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
you did it.
Shall we say they escaped with their asses?
Intact.
yes.
Oh wow! But no, I saw that story and I said, "Really? Is this real?" And sure enough, they did defect. You know, as to the dialogue, of course, that's satirical. But yeah, so it did happen. And so there you have our crazy story of the week. Well, that'll wrap us up for this week. If you've enjoyed our program, please pass the word to your friends and associates, believers and non-believers alike. Again, just a reminder that you are welcome to post questions and comments on our Facebook page. Remember, there is a big difference between having good reasons for what one accepts to be true and having bad ones. Incidentally, this is the only distinction one needs to become a strict atheist. This has been Dr. Brad for Tate and Tim saying so long.
See ya.